Hello, everyone. My name is Akal, and I am a somatic therapist, astrological counselor, etc., etc. If you'd like to check out about the various services I offer, you can check out my website, which I have posted down below this video. So, what we're going to go over today is Rohini Nakshatra. I've done videos on this before, but specifically, what we're going to talk about with Rohini this time is the concept of the padas, which are essentially four divisions within Rohini itself. Now, essentially, what this does is it adds. I would hesitate to tell anyone to put a whole lot of weight in this, but essentially, what this is adding is nuance. So these are characteristics, attributes that you may or may not, relate to. So let me go ahead and describe this. So essentially what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at how the various energies associated with Rohini, how they intertwine. So what we're looking at here is Rohini falls within Taurus. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. So that is one of the overarching energies. So then Rohini specifically, the nakshatra itself, is ruled by the moon. So you have the Venus and the moon. So we're getting a little bit of a story that's starting to form here. We're starting to see how these energies mix. Then what we have is the padas, again, those four divisions. Now these four divisions within Rohini are, you see past my shoulder, we have the Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Moon. So Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Moon are the four padas. Now what's most interesting to me about how this particular nakshatra is, I don't know, this is always generally considered one of those very fortunate placements, and I think that's because of how the Venus and the moon mix. So the two words that I kept seeing here was receptivity and nourishment. So why receptivity? Well, that would have a lot to do with Venus. Venus being sort of, I guess, like the archetypical feminine planet in astrology. So Venus represents in a lot of ways our sort of feeling aspect. It represents our sensuality, our feeling. And again, this requires receptivity. This requires that we tune into what we're feeling. So it's essentially we're surrendering in a lot of ways to our senses here. We're tuning into our senses. So Venus, generally speaking, I like to look at as essentially the conduit that the energy for the senses flows through. Now the moon, which rules this nakshatra specifically, is about nourishment. I like to think in my mind, in evolutionary astrology, for instance, they say it's the ego. I sometimes agree with that and sometimes I don't, but the one thing I will say that's pretty much an agreement is the moon in a lot of ways represents the sort of mental emotional. It also specifically, I think about the phrase I need. So it's what we need to feel emotional comfort. So nourishment is often associated with the moon, with Cancer, that is the astrological sign Cancer. So now what I mean by that is it has to do with nourishing others, nourishing oneself. But primarily I like to think of oneself when it comes to I need. So where this sign in general, if you look at Venus and the moon together, we're looking at some possible it's definitely a materialistic placement. And I don't mean that in a bad way. This is this is a great sign for in terms of like prosperity, etc. So, because again, it's the path that this individual might take is going to be very much towards those things that one wants to, I guess, obtain in life because they have this internal dialogue around I need. So they're going to seek those things that bring them comfort, bring them nourishment, etc. So Rohini also, just to keep in mind, it's a Rajasic nakshatra. This is what the energy that is projected outward. It's Rajasic energy. And what that basically means is activity. Rajasic energy is very proactive, very positive, very driven, and it's moving toward some goal, some fixed, object or whatever it may want to obtain. So, and it could be information, it could be knowledge, it could be education, it could be things and stuff. Whatever that goal may be, there's activity and it moves towards that. And that is Rajasic energy. So, what we got so far in summation, we have very sensual feeling and sensing. I need, so the desire to obtain or to nourish one's, I guess, one's ego. And again, it's very active. So this is not a lazy placement. So now looking at the padas, or the 4 divisions, now the other thing to keep in mind here is when you look at your chart, and down below this video, there's going to be a link, well, not a link, but I'll post the website for vaultoftheheavens.com. And that's where you can go to get your specific nakshatras and your placements. And so specifically what we want to look at here is your placement of your moon, your sun, or your ascendant. I tend to think of those as the 3 dominant energies that seem to be playing out in our life path. So with the padas, these 4 subdivisions, these are essentially 4 characteristics that are in Rohini no matter what. So you may have been born in, say, pada 1, which would be ruled by Mars. So you may have this extra oomph to you, a little more energy, a little more drive. And again, the word I found online was passion. So that is how Mars plays into this. So you could say Venus plus Moon plus Mars. You mix all that together, you've got, this passion is this word. You have Venus and Mars mixing. So we're talking about, there's a possibility here of this person being very sexual if you're born in the pada 1. There almost could be a need about it, the moon. So pada 2, Venus. So I saw abundance and wealth were the 2 words for pada 2 that I saw. Abundance or wealth, again, with the idea of Venus here, Venus again is this very receptive, it sensate pleasures, things like that. I'm not exactly sure why they chose the word abundance and wealth with this particular placement, but I guess when you factor in, what happens when Venus and the moon mix, it's the need of sensate pleasures, that you might see a person who's going to be particularly driven when you've got Venus and a little extra Venus in one's placement. So pada 2 has extra Venus, so there may be a little extra desire to move towards those things that bring abundance and wealth and comfort, etc. Pada 3, Mercury. Mercury is kind of mutable. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The word I saw for this was resilience. So why resilience? I think partially because these energies, the moon and Venus, and this whole placement here it tends to be, again, these individuals are driven by those things that they're feeling. So, and again, it is very driven, it is very action oriented. So I don't necessarily perceive these individuals as hitting a block and going, oh, that's it, I'm done. Like the word resilient here is really, I think, appropriate, particularly when we're considering Mercury. So Mercury, again, would say, okay, you hit a block on your particular drive towards whatever the goal is. And then what it can do is there's a little extra intelligence here, so it can reframe it, look at it a different way, and try something new. So hence resilience, the ability to bounce back. Then finally, the 4th pada, if you can see past my shoulder, is the moon. And the word I saw for the moon in the 4th pada is comfort. And I thought about this a little bit. Again, it's what one needs to nourish themselves in life. And it's about nourishing your emotions more than anything. The 4th house in astrology, which is associated with the moon, some of the characteristics associated with the 4th house, sometimes they talk about the past. They talk about the mother. They talk about the home. So these kinds of characteristics, this idea of comfort, I would say have a lot to do with this idea of the past, home, the mother, etc., because those are things that will soothe the emotions. Emotions in and of themselves, they're not feelings. Don't confuse feelings and emotions. They're two separate things. The emotions are often tied to our past, hence the association of the past with the fourth house. We often store these in our body, these emotions. Think around your hips. When your hips are tight, there's most likely emotions stored there. And the best way to think about emotions is energy in motion. Oftentimes, energy is not in motion. It gets stuck, and it's felt internally as a pressure. So oftentimes what we're looking to do is we're looking to soothe those emotions so we have a release from that pressure. And so in some ways, a home, if you have a secure sense of home, if you have comfort, again, that word, the fourth pada, if you have comfort, it may soothe those emotions. A mother soothes the child. So hopefully you're kind of getting the theme here. So again, with that fourth pada, we got a little extra moon added to this Venus moon dynamic. So again, an extra sort of desire for comfort and for soothing one's emotions. So hopefully all that kind of makes a little bit of sense to you. And again, with all these nakshatras, this is basically what we're looking at. And you could say arguably in everyone's charts, what we're looking at is not necessarily what's important isn't necessarily the attributes or characteristics of these things. The attributes and the characteristics are simply the sort of how the mind wants to attach to the innate energies that are associated here. The innate energies here, again, are Venus and Moon. So once you understand the archetypes around Venus and Moon, you can kind of see how these energies intertwine and how they mix together. So with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.